You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. As always, we appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's guest, former Green Beret, who went on to develop his own nonprofit and also makes bombs. Guess that's pretty cool. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, our normal announcements. As always, please continue to follow us on social media, at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground and Hazard Ground Podcast. Make sure you guys give a like to all the content there as well. Share it with a friend. Tell your friends to follow us as well. Want to grow the social media following. Speaking of growing our following, need some more of those Apple reviews. Keep leaving them. Tell us why you love the show. Certainly appreciate you guys giving us 5 stars and leaving some comments. I read them all. I get them all. So I appreciate them all. It certainly helps grow the algorithm in our favor. As I've told you guys repeatedly, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that like button, smash the thumbs up, and tell us why you love each and every episode, and leave some comments for each of the guests. We certainly appreciate that. Don't forget about our promotion with Amazon. You go to our website, hazardground.com. You click on the Amazon button up at the bottom of the homepage. It'll redirect you to Amazon. You can do all of your normal Amazon shopping. I'll get a percentage of what you guys spend. I'll donate a percentage of that back to some of the charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the show. So it's a great way for you guys to help out veterans charities just by doing Amazon shopping. Again, holidays right around the corner. If you're going to do Amazon, go to hazardground.com first. Doesn't require you to do anything else, but we certainly appreciate all the monetary support to keep the podcast going, as well as our ability to support other organizations out there and veterans organizations out there as well. So thank you guys for that in advance. Of course, as always, go to the website, hazardground.com, and contact us. Any comments you want to direct to me personally, you can always do it there. I'll get them and respond to them as in a timely manner as possible. But I certainly appreciate you guys reaching out as well with guest suggestions. If you have guest suggestions, it's a great way to put them in there. Anybody you know would like to be on the show, have their story told and shared with the audience. It's a great way to get us connected that way. So again, hazardground.com, contact us is the way to do so. All right, this week's guest is a former Army Green Beret who left the military as a captain after 8+ years of service, 3+ years in the Green Berets. He was awarded an ARCOM with V device for his actions in Iraq. He went on to work for Goldman Sachs for a year, so I guess that makes him very smart. Then he ended up getting a master's in explosive engineering and worked for a company called Los Alamos, which in the short term is he made nuclear components, nuclear weapon components, and helped develop bombs. He also founded a nonprofit organization called Sportsmen for Warriors, who helps our country's warriors through custom-tailored support in enrichments, engagements, and educational and employment opportunities. He is Ben Bateman joining us here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Ben, welcome, man. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Mark. Thank you for this opportunity. Glad to be here.
No problem. I guess I will start off with a bad joke and saying, from what I'm told, you're the bomb. Get it? See what I did there? I'll show myself out. Thank you very much.
Great dad joke. Great dad joke.
You know, listen, when you get to be my dad jokes, my kids are 8, so dad jokes reign supreme because the ones they come back with me at are infinitely worse. And I have to remind them how not funny they are. But again, different conversation for a different day. So look, a very wide swath of things that you've done in your career. There's not many people who can go from working at Goldman Sachs, for crying out loud, to in wealth management to end up making bombs. So we'll get to that journey in just a moment. But at the beginning, you went to West Point and you signed up or you got there in 2001. Was it before or after 9/11?
It was before 9/11. Actually, I was in Arabic class when the towers fell. So as I like to tell people, I wasn't quite smart enough to get in the first time. So I went to a small preparatory school in Alabama called Marion Military Institute. So I was fortunate enough to validate a couple courses, and I was in Arabic class, and I just remember commotion coming down the hall that we were under attack, and everything changed from there.
Did you always know you wanted to go to West Point?
I did. Well, I'd read a lot, and so it was kind of a mythical place. And then I was in JROTC in high school, and I think just kind of fruition. I mean, I'd read everything I could about Patton. I read about Eisenhower, Lee. I'd studied a lot of U.S. history. And so I just figured once I kind of became smart enough, I started researching West Point like that. Oh, it's an actual place. It's a college. It's a place I can go. And I grew up in a lower middle class family. My dad was a heavy equipment operator. My mom had dropped out of high school, but she worked as a teacher's assistant in special education. So there was no, it was me. My future was going to be dictated by me. And so West Point was where I really wanted to go. I knew I always wanted to serve. I always wanted to be a Green Beret. And then 9/11 happened, and it just kind of confirmed the convictions that I had done my entire life.
How did you know about the Green Berets as a kid?
I guess just reading a lot, and like I was 8, 9 years old when Desert Storm happened, and I remember reading about him. I remember reading about him in Vietnam, and I just thought that I could do all that. And when 9/11 happened, and the first soldiers on the ground, the horse soldiers, famous, made by the now movie 12 Strong. I just remember, I grew up hunting and fishing, spending time in the outdoors, riding horses, things that set me up for success to be a Green Beret, I would say. It's I can do that. I can merge 21st century warfare with primitive technologies, with ancient warfare. And I just had the belief in myself, and I pushed myself, and I made the decisions along the way that set the conditions for success.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't know about Green Berets until after I was on active duty. I just, it was not anything that was exposed. And again, I spent most of my active duty time all of my active duty time was prior to 9/11. And it was just something that wasn't talked about. It's not as out in the open and as public now and as cool now as it was back then. Back then, it was just a bunch of really hardened warriors who wanted to be badasses and do it under the cloak and silence of secrecy. It was now it's everybody's a Green Beret, everybody wants to be, and it's cool and everything else. It's a different tenor, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I think it fits a lot of that personality. I think it fit my personality. I entered the Army, or I entered West Point as a be all you can be type of person, and I just always wanted to push myself. 9/11 happened. I was studying unconventional warfare, or as my time as a cadet, I studied unconventional warfare, and realized then it was dimes, right? Domestic information, military, economic, and society. So understanding that warfare is not just bombs and bullets. And so I decided to major in economics because it's a new technique to warfare. I'm not the smartest computer science guy, so I figured I could do more value with economics and numbers than I could doing any other areas. Now it's since changed to PMISI, so it's political, military, economic, social, industry, and information. So just the different things. So my approach when you look at warfare, let's look at COVID, right? We shut down the world over something we can't see, we can't trace, and it's not like a firefight where, as a commander, I can establish what the decisive point. If we overtake this building, the enemy cannot stop us. That's our decisive point. What's the decisive point on a virus? Right. And so it's warfare. They shut down the world for a virus that 99.98% of the people who got it survived. That's unconventional warfare 101. And we fell prey to it.
Yeah. Again, a whole different conversation there. I don't disagree at all. And look, don't even get me started. I ran a COVID task force for the state here as a member of the National Guard in Georgia. So I get an up close and personal view of everything that was done and why it was done. And again, that's a completely different podcast. But to your point, I think it's interesting because growing up in a military that was surrounded by combat and deployments and everything else, when you talk about the economic impact, I think that in and of itself, sort of dictates, at least in Iraq, it did for me. I don't know how it was for you, but when I think back to it, now that you say that, it dictated a lot of the battlefield, right? It dictated
100%.
The economic situation of any given area dictated the battlefield. I mean, look,
look at our policy. Look at our policies, right? We had the de-Baathification of Iraq, the Ba'ath Party, which were predominantly Sunni. And again, my specialty in the it was the Middle East. So I studied Arabic. I studied the Quran. I did all that. So I'm above average. I'm not the smartest guy on it, but I was trying to know my enemy so I could be better at finding ways to defeat them. But we took the entire ruling population of Iraq, everybody who, everything from running sewer plants and power plants. We're like, oh, just kidding. You can't have a job. We forced people into terrorism. Al Qaeda took advantage of that. They then paid them. And then, I was there before the surge. I was there when a rural sheik woke up and said, hey, Al Qaeda just threatened my oldest son. And, in the Middle East and the Arab and Muslim culture, the oldest son's that's your lineage. That's your heir apparent, or, to use like Western, like the king, his first son, the prince, is going to be His Royal Highness. He's the next in line. And when they came to them and said, hey, if you don't start attacking the Americans more, which was economic because that's how they were paying the bills, because we, the U.S. government, and all of our wisdom, stopped paying them or forced them out of jobs. How else are they going to take care of their family? How are they going to buy food? How are they going to provide? It's all economic. And they just said, okay, if we don't attack the Americans enough, then we're going to get killed by, or, part of my family and my lineage is going to get killed off. Well, let's give the Americans a try. Maybe they'll pay us. We ended up paying them more. So it wasn't like General Petraeus's infinite wisdom. It was what Al Qaeda was doing to change the battlefield, and they miscalculated.
Yes.
In Iraq, what happened? We went to war. I mean, we'll probably get to it, but we went out and we went on a mission where the rules of engagement was, if they don't have a shirt on, shirts and skins. If they have a shirt on and they have an AK, game on to engage. If they don't have a shirt on in December in Iraq where it's cold, they're one of us. Don't shoot them.
Oh, that's interesting. I had a much different set of engagement. We'll get to that.
Well, that was for that mission, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah,
but there's a quick mission to go out and link up with the local sheiks and their guerrilla force almost. Again, I was conventional as an infantry platoon leader at the time.
Yeah, and again, I think the bigger takeaway, that obviously you never think about it when you're downrange, right? Like, I mean, maybe you do if you have some sort of key leader engagement with the local populace and the local sheikh, where you think about, hey, if we can get some money influx in here, we can solve some of our problems. But even that is a Band-Aid fix. But in general, downrange, you're not thinking about how, the economic impact of a certain area can change the landscape of the battle. You're thinking about survival, right? You're thinking about accomplishing the mission for you. I think it's.
I don't know.
Well, maybe you did. I'm not that smart, so I just want to get out of there alive and take everybody with me. So I didn't really have these kind of revelations until after the fact.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you have, like, combat's not just 100% kinetic the entire time, right? So you have downtime to think about stuff. You have those opportunities, right? And, it starts with, hey, let's approach, like, you always want to walk softly, carry the big stick, 100%, and ready to go kinetic and ready to take the fight to the enemy when that happens. But also at the same time, you're asked to pass out soccer balls and grain and chocolates and all those things. And along the way, when you have those meetings and you sit down with your subordinate leaders, your direct reports, you start thinking like, in the sense of battle, it's like, okay, we're getting fired at from this building. All right, we're going to this next one. No, we're not mechanically breaching this door going in. Or, hey, the neighbor said this person's a sheik. We're definitely not going to do a hard knock on this one. Or, you go to link up at a building and a guy comes out and yells at you, and one of your young infantrymen tackles him, right? Like, it just happens to be a sheik. How do you overcome all these things? So there's challenges that are thought. And again, I'm not the smartest person out there. I'm not. I think about things differently. I try to understand patterns. I try to understand those other factors that can help us win.
Well, it's thinking about the cause versus the symptoms, right?
That's right.
That is critical sometimes. And my guess is that young infantryman who tackled the guys an actual real story that seemed to, resonate.
It is, yes.
We'll get to that coming up. All right. So you're finishing up West Point. By the time you get out of there, what is it, 05?
05, yeah. I graduated May of 2005.
All right. Both wars have completely kicked off. I mean, just out of curiosity, from both your parents who came from very meek and meager beginnings, what was their level of concern of you now heading off to combat in the near future?
I think they were definitely concerned about that. I mean, I don't think it became a reality until fast forward. I graduated May of 2005. I started at Fort Benning in July of 2005. Infantry Officer Basic Course, Ranger School, get to my unit, and then I ship out in October 2006. So, that's when that reality happened. And I think honestly, like most people are, it's a disconnect versus World War II where Ford's and GM stopped producing vehicles. This was just another day in the life, unless you knew somebody that was actually getting ready to go overseas or was downrange. It didn't generally impact. Like an IED goes off in Iraq and kills 4 people. It's not impacting the average American, unfortunately, because they never get behind it. But again, World War II, they rationed food, industries shut down and completely retooled to support the war effort. And it was an unconditional warfare that we were fighting against the Germans and the Japanese.
Did you ever have a conversation with your parents about it? I mean, you seem pretty cerebral, so I feel like it's something that, you would have sort of laid out very matter of factly for them.
I mean, I talked to them, but again, like my parents didn't serve. My will to serve came from my grandfather and my great grandfather. My grandfather was in the Navy in World War II, and I just always felt that was me. Like that's what I was put here on Earth to do.
That's pretty impressive. Okay, so we're leaving for Iraq in October of 2006. What are you told prior to going?
Well, up until about August of 2006, we were going to Afghanistan. We got back from JRTC, and just kidding, you're going to Iraq or sometime around.
Those are the good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. So, and my battalion was detached from the rest of the brigade. We were sent to Ramadi, which was where my battalion. So, long story short, the unit I joined went from Korea to Ramadi, Iraq, to Fort Carson, and then we went back. My battalion went back to the same fire bases, and So then the train up became, okay, I get it, but it's changed in the 2 years or year and a half since you guys left. There's fundamental changes.
I assume you're 4ID at this point in time.
Actually, a second infantry, second brigade, second infantry division. But we reflagged after that mission before they went to Iraq or went to Afghanistan in 2009.
So you never had to go to Camp Casey then, obviously.
I did not know.
Good for you. Although some people said they enjoy it. It kind of just depends on the personality and who you talk to.
Yeah.
So you end up in Ramadi. Now, I left my first deployment in April of 2006, so it was about 6 months before you had got there. And throughout all of 2005, into 2006, Fallujah and Ramadi were the 2 worst places you could have been in Iraq at any given point in time.
Ramadi was worse. Just Fallujah was, the Marines want Fallujah, but the Iraq, the Al Qaeda declared Ramadi as their capital. And if you study the history, it had once been the Sunni stronghold. It wasn't Fallujah, it was Ramadi. And I'm not saying that because I went there. I'm just saying that because of facts.
Right. No, I understand.
It's the most dangerous city in the world.
That's why I was prefacing it. I can remember being told to go convoy there, in the early part of 2006. And that was when the pucker factor was real. That was the one where I kept my mouth shut. And then in the back of my head, I'm going, please give this mission to somebody else. Please give this mission to somebody else. Right. Because you knew it was a different level. It was a whole different level of operation and level of enemy fighters. Right. Like they were just hardened and better trained. There were more of them on a routine basis. And it made the whole entire lay of the land different. So when you get there, are you told what your mission is? Are you just securing an area? What are you told?
We were securing an area, right? We'd just fallen in on everything that the previous unit, the first of the 506 from the 101st had been doing. And all of it was like, man, this is dumb. This is dumb. This doesn't make sense. Like we were merely like keeping roads open. It wasn't, we weren't taking the fight to the enemy. We weren't establishing, or very often, right? Like it was more like, this doesn't make sense, or these guys are compromised. I mean, one of the first things we did was we had an Overwatch position on the main ASR between TQ Alpha Cobham and Corregidor along ASR Michigan. And to prevent IEDs, we'd have one vehicle, down on the road. We'd have another vehicle further down the road. And then we had an Overwatch vehicle that was a click away watching those two. I mean, we were lucky we didn't have what happened to the 10th Mountain guys where they overtook the two vehicles. It was just, luck in some of those poor outposts that we fell in on. And I fought hard to change it.
Were you successful?
Yeah. I mean, eventually we just started taking the fight to the enemy. But it took, we got in country in late October. It took a month, and then December rolls around, and that's when we started going kinetic, truly kinetic. I mean, there was some stuff here and there. I had a guy shot in the hand before that, but it was all, an unorganized element that's just shooting at Americans or placing IEDs.
I mean, did anything other than that one individual happen? Was there any sort of ambushes or attacks that you dealt with that sort of predicate, hey, we need to start taking it to the enemy?
Lots of IEDs.
Yeah, well, it's the flavor of the month. It just there was no way to without offensive operations, there was no way to mitigate those.
That's right. We were just reacting. We weren't planning. We weren't changing the status quo. We were keeping all of our bases open. We were doing all that. It was just.
Yeah. And, I ran more convoys than anything else, from Baghdad to all over the country, within like 2 hours driving distance, as far north as Balad, as far out west as Ramadi, and, Diwania, Mahmudiya, all south of Baghdad, areas like that. And of course, with every single outpost in the city.
Yep.
So I understood that the IED threat as well as anybody, but it was just one of those things where the unit I was attached with, I was with 5th and 10th Group at the time, over at RPC, and that wasn't their job. It wasn't their job to go find guys. It wasn't the Siege of Soda's job to go find the IED in places per se, like on a routine basis. They were looking for more higher value targets. But in the meantime, I'm running back and forth all over the damn country trying to avoid all these things on a routine basis. So, it
impacted you.
Yeah. Which is, that's why they sent me to do it. Less important guys, right? Lowest guy on the totem pole. But no, and again, I certainly understand that. So when you start taking the fight to the enemy, what changes? I mean, how successful is it initially?
It was actually very successful. I mean, we went out into areas that no one had gone into, and during that deployment, sometimes it was months, sometimes it was years since anybody outside of just special operations had gone into the area. And then, it was a multi-pronged approach. We would go out. We would go after the highest level person we could. And fortunately we had the chain of command that supported us. My battalion commander supported us lieutenants or us platoon leaders in doing our job and really taking the fight to the enemy. When we were in combat, what we asked for, as long as it's realistic, they would push to us, whether it's Gimlars. I asked for Moabs multiple times, got, denied, but that was a minimum safe distance. But I mean, we got everything you could ask for. We did, but it was a balance, right? So for me, I hated being in vehicles because, me in a Humvee with 3 guys or 5 guys versus a bomb that's strong enough to flip an Abrams tank over and kill the crew. It's risk and reward. So how am I going to mitigate my risk? I'm going to carry a 240. I'm going to carry 3 240s. I'm going to carry whatever the mission dictates. But in order to mitigate, I've got, 30 guys on the ground. I got to know what air supports I have. I got to know all these assets that I can push out to. I got to be dialed in on my pre-planned fires and then adjust because, like everything, plan's great until either boots hit the ground or first bullets fly. And then you're just adjusting to that and really empowering my subordinate leaders to actually do their job.
To that end, you're a for lack of a better term here, because I was one too at one point, a lowly platoon leader. So there had to be some level of, top down sort of, hey, LT, just go do this. This is what needs. You're not going to get this, you're not going to get that, but this needs to get done. Go do it, kind of deal.
Yeah. 100% there was.
Okay.
But it was me creating those relationships with the other people, with the fire cell, with the different elements, so that I knew what was on station. Right. Like I didn't get, us conventional infantry guys. We don't get all the assets the soft guys get pushed to us. We don't roll out with all the assets stacked with all the fast movers, all the aviation. It's more knowing what's going to be nearby and when, and then asking for it. At first it's like, well, how do you know this is here? Don't worry how I know. Just send me the asset.
Don't worry about how I know what I know. That's what I get paid for, right?
That's right.
When does it start to go bad or turn in a different direction for you?
What do you mean?
I mean, well, does it start to go bad? I mean, look, when you create offensive operations, the equal and opposite reaction is a force that matches yours from the 100%. Enemy.
Yeah. So I mean, so for us is that first mission in December when we went outside of our pre-approved convoy road support, and it's like everything, right? Like whether you're training for mixed martial arts, I've been training for years to be a platoon leader. I just wanted to go out and get in a fight with the enemy. And that's what I've been waiting for. Not in a bad way, not that I was changing things, just, like, hey, this is what I've trained for. Ranger school, Infantry Officer basic course. I've done all the live fires from the, individual up to platoon live fire and even some modified company level ones. Like, let me go do my job. This is what I've trained for. I'm in combat. I want to go close with and destroy the enemy. And so for us, it was December 4th. We'd moved, I think it was like December 2nd. We started out, we started this mission. They took us down the road and then we walked. They probably carried us, 5-6 kilometers. And then we just walked to our fire base. We took over a big building that was on the road because it was the highest building. It's 2 twin 3-story buildings. I had a sister platoon, probably, 800-900 meters to my northeast. I had another sister platoon element to probably like southwest or southeast. And then, so the night of December 3rd, or sometime on the 3rd, my company commander said, hey, let the enemy know you're there. So it's Iraq, it's December, we're next to the Euphrates. And my guys are like, sir, I'm cold, I'm freezing. I was like, let's have fires. Let's have bonfires on the roof. You guys are out pulling security. Let's have some giant bonfires. I get a call on the radio, like, what are you doing? I was like, your mission, your guidance to me was let the enemy know you're there. What better guidance, or what better way to let enemy know you're there than having fires on the roof? Like we knew. And the next day, we went kinetic. So
that's fun.
It's not like we're not doing patrol base operations where we're trying to hide out. Like if your guidance to me is let people know you're there, fires on the roof is a pretty big indicator.
I was going to say, what was the proposed suggestion and how you should do that otherwise?
I don't know. Maybe it's patrolling out in the areas, but like at nighttime when Iraqis are sleeping, there's no benefit to that. We're just the devil. So again, I can go in depth as far as like accusations made by other Americans about being called the devil Ramadi, but everybody who goes out at night is called the devil Ramadi. And when you speak Arabic, it's confirmation that, oh, the devil was here. Okay. Shaitan is Arabic for devil.
Yeah. So. Okay. Well, now that you have officially anointed yourself as the devil by lighting fires on the roof.
I was not the devil, but when we'd go out night on missions and then we'd go out, the great planning, like let's go out, capture this person. And then the next day we're going to go back out in that same exact area and we're going to pass out soccer balls. Well, shocking. Mom is going to come up to us and say, hey, the devil stole my baby. The devil came last night and stole my baby. They don't know it was Green Berets, they don't know SEALs, they don't know it was conventional infantry guys like myself at the time. They just know some American, gringo, if you will, took their kid. even though, but he's innocent. Just, I mean, same thing with watch Fox News or watch any news that interviews the mom. My son was innocent. My daughter was innocent. Okay. Well, I didn't show up. And the soft guys definitely didn't show up to take over your son. They had some intel that said your kid was a person of interest and was doing some bad things.
Right. So morning of December 4th, once everybody knows you're there, do they attack you first, or do you have to go get them, so to speak?
No, they attacked us. So it was one. So we had one terp, 3 platoons spread out throughout this little area in Ramadi out to the east. So we weren't actually in the city. We were in like the rural farming suburbs of Ramadi at the time. And so I got ordered to take my terp down to the company headquarters. While I'm down there, I just hear shots, and I'm like, that sounds like it's over by me. It's like my boys are getting attacked. And so come to find out, one of my guys, crazy story, this kid, 6'7", he had to wait in Kuwait until he turned 18. So he gets in country like end of November, and this is December 4th. He gets shot as he's walking up the stairs. We had put, because we got there like the night, we'd been there less than 24 hours over a short time period. So we just put up blankets, but apparently they were able to see him and they shot him. So I'm like, all right, I get a call on the radio. Hey, we got a wounded, urgent. So I'm with my commander, and he's trying to talk. I'm like, so I got to go. I got a guy that's gonna bleed out. I just got the radio call. You heard it too. I'm gonna go. I need the terp. He's like, no, you can't take the terp. It's like, all right. So I take my squad back, and I was like, all right, well, we're gonna look for HLZs to put a medevac bird or a Casevac bird down in this kind of like a, I don't know, cornfield to convert it to, like, I don't know what it was, but like it looked like it had been growing stuff there. But it was December, so nothing was growing. And on the way back, like I'm looking, I'm with one of my first squad, and I've got 17 different things. Like, all right, oh shoot, there's these power lines that were on the like part of it. So it's like I'm looking, trying to figure out, like, can we put a Chinook down here? How big a bird can we put? All right, if we can't fit a Chinook there, can we fit a Blackhawk? Right, like doing the calculations for the size of the landing zone. Next thing you know, just get opened up on, right? And it was a pretty intensive area. And so I've got me in a squad. We've got two, like a rundown building. There's a building and there's a ditch. I run to the building. The rest of my guys run to the ditch, and they just turn the effort. And I'm not saying I'm awesome. They just turn the effort or the focus on me, because I'm a 6'2" dude, but not because I'm the biggest target, but I had antennas on, right? And so in that time, Iraqis had learned that, hey, if a guy has a antenna for a radio, shoot that person. They're the target. And I was short man, so I didn't have an RTO. It was me, my forward observer was at the house, because it was stupid planning on my part to not take him, but it actually ended up being good. And they just opened up on us. What we found out later was it was a Iranian Quds force that had attacked us, 9 to 11 dudes, and just got knocked out by an Abrams. Asked for support. I was asked. We had a Harrier came on station, but his bomb was too big based on minimum safe distance. So all he could do was a flyby. I was asking for Abrams, and finally got the Abrams support. They came down, and time changes, right? Fight or flight takes over. Everything slows down. Stuff that your ability to focus, like actual see things, goes down substantially. Like true combat. I'm asking for stuff on the net, getting denied. And so finally I'm talking to Abrams. I'm like, shoot. And he had gotten the clearance because it was the battalion commander 05 level decision. So finally I'm like, because Abrams have a hand mic on the back. I was like, I'm going to go up and see what's going on. Like, why are these guys not shooting? I jump out of the trench, and that's about the time they decide to engage. And just that concussion knocks me out, knocks me back into the trench. I'm out. I don't know for how long. My guys come to, and my guys come to me. One of my guys was like shaking me. One of my team leaders like, "Sure, you all right? Sure, you all right?" I'm like, "Oh, come to. I can't see anything. Like, I see stars. Clearly, I had a traumatic brain injury, and then I can't hear very well. I'm screaming, which was not normal me. Like I'd gone. So I'm like, all right, take a deep breath, relax. I just couldn't hear anything. So like me screaming on the radio was like, and somebody's like, "Sir, you're screaming." And so I calm down, get refocused, and then come to find out at that same time they had attacked my sister platoon and they'd shot those guys, and so they had one immediate KIA, one urgent surgical. So they sent the XO with an M113, a tracked vehicle predecessor to the Bradley, came to my position because when we got ambushed, I was in between the line of fire between me and my squad leader. He gets hit he got the Forrest Gump wound, that shot in the butt. And so I got a guy in my position, and I've got my platoon, the rest of my platoons up in these two twin houses. My platoon sergeant at the time lost it, ran out of our building because the two buildings were split between Iraqi army in one and us, because we got an attachment like that afternoon. They showed up, or the evening prior, they showed up with us. He ran into the other one, so I'm talking to my FO. My FO's controlling, asking for assets, asking for air support, trying to call fire on these guys, and then my medics, talking. He's wanting to get to my position because we have the wounded guy. He'd already stabilized the other guy, and so it was a lot of chaos. And that's what combat, you realize it's chaos. And during that time, I guess my actions merited Archon with V. I wrote up two of my guys for Silver Stars. I wrote up two guys for Bronze Star with V. All of them were awarded, and multiple Archon with V. Is just people doing stuff. And I think that's what set the conditions for success of why I always felt the need to do more. And that's what helped fast forward 8 years. I founded a nonprofit. It was, if I ask for something on the radio, they're going to send me that asset. And I wanted to eventually pay back everyone who'd saved me. I mean, I'm here having this conversation with you because others risked their life for me.
How do you guys get out of there,
though? The tanks show up, start shooting.
That helps.
That helps. Yeah. And then they just realize that like, shit, there's some significant force, and they broke contact.
Yeah. Superiority of fire is
that's right. Superiority of fire, massing elements, all those basic comments.
Yeah. It's funny how some of the stuff I learned in ROTC, which made absolutely no sense at the time, it made sense in words, but then like when you see it play out, economy of force, and effort, all those things that absolutely matter.
Yeah. When Abrams show up, when Harriers show up, if you've got 9-10 dudes, you're like, well, there's a lot of firepower. I want to live to see another day. And that's what the guys who were fighting did. They just broke contact.
Yeah. How did your perspective change after that day, as far as, somebody who said, just want to take the fight to the enemy and seek and destroy the enemy. Now that's happened. Does anything change in your mindset?
Yes. You want to do it more, but you don't want to be shot at. You're like, damn, I don't want to be shot at again. Like once, like
advantage here every time.
Pop your cherry, whatever you want to call it. Like once it's done, you're like, okay, if I never get shot at again the rest of my life, I'm good. But unfortunately, I did. But it's, it's that first thing. And I just remember I had several of my squad leaders come up. I had several of that team leader that had come up to me. He became that acting squad leader since mine was medevac, and I didn't know the extent. I was just focusing on orchestrating the chaos between Abrams and asking for stuff. I didn't know how bad his wound was. His other team leaders, Bravo team leaders, taking care of him. It was, like you miss things when you get fixated. And when I'm doing my job, right, like providing security, establishing that cordon so that we can do the Kazakh, we can do all these other things. Like you don't get to see the whole picture. So like I didn't know how bad he was wounded. I just know he got shot. I know he was, like, I'm shot. I heard those things, but I wasn't there like focusing on him, because if I did, I was missing out. And I can tell you a story when I fixated on the Kazakh rather than creating security. It all worked out. But each mission, you just want to try to be a little bit better. Or like when we were cadets, we had General Hal Moore come and talk to us. From we were soldiers once and young, and now Fort Benning's named Fort Moore. He always talked about there's always one more thing you can do. So I always fixate on, all right, okay, I did this, I established security. Now what? Okay, now can I make this position better? Or okay, here we are. I need some air support. I'm short on ammo. Okay, I'm requesting ammo. I'm doing all these other things. Or hey, platoons aren't request ammo. Or hey, what's our load? All these different things. Just do one more simple thing to just keep going. Because you want to be ready in the event. Like, okay, we established security. We haven't taken fire. What happens if they start shooting us again? Okay, now I'm going to start looking. Okay, where do I need to put my machine gun? Where do I need to put my saw? Where do I need to put my 240? Where do I need to establish? So, okay, I think they're going to shoot us from here. Or, I've got another element, and maybe I have a blind spot and I have another element. Like, hey, watch this area. I can't see.
Right.
And it's just adjusting and adapting.
I mean, look, that's the difference.
It's fun though. It's fun. Like in the time.
And while you're an infantryman and I wasn't, when you get that sort of lull in combat, inevitably it happens, right? Like
always happens.
The movies look like it's one continuous, nonstop barrage of it goes until everybody's dead, and that's when we stop. No, that's not how combat actually works. It's for what seems like 20 to 30 minutes, probably only 5 to 10, and then things just take a quick, pause for whatever reason, because eventually people just stop shooting at nothing. If there's nothing there, people just don't waste bullets like they do in TV. And, for whatever reason, there's only one clip, and yet there's an endless supply of rounds that keep flying out of the weapon. Also something that's not reality. But beyond that, you get these lulls, and the difference, what I was leading to is between you and me, is that one more thing that you talk about. For me, it's like, okay, just get your figure out where everybody is and what's going on, and pause for a second. And while I'm doing that, you're doing one more thing. Like that's kind of the difference, and
trying to, yeah.
Some of that is,
and I'm not saying I'm just that's what I embodied, but that's I think that was the difference between me and some of my other platoon leaders is, okay, right, we're taking fire from here. We need to focus over here. Or, hey, my tingly senses are going off. This isn't going to be good.
Proactive versus reactive, right? I mean,
yeah, that's right.
There's a certain amount. And again, and there's two things that are different. One, you guys are taking up an active stance. In a convoy, everything is reactive. My job is to get stuff from point A to point B. I'm not there to take the fight to the enemy. I'm there to carry shit from point A to point B. So everything I'm doing by nature is reactive. That doesn't mean I shouldn't be more proactive, but I could just tell you my personal experience again was get your bearings for a second, figure out where the hell everybody is and what's going on. And then I can finally think about, the next step, which is usually put your foot on the gas.
Yeah. But once you get through that, right, you do the after action report, like, okay, here's what I sucked at. All right, X, Y, and Z. Got to work on these. And between now and the next time you're going out on that mission, it's like, okay, I got to get better at X, Y, and Z. But I did well on this. Okay, so I'm going to maintain these things. I'm going to maintain calm, try to, minus me yelling on the radio because I couldn't hear anything. It was just, okay, maintain calmness, take a deep breath, relax, okay, move, execute, adjust. And then next mission.
By the way, were you ever tested for a TBI at that point in time, or was it just...
No, we didn't do any of that. No, when I got back, my medic looked at me.
How many fingers am I holding up?
My medic looked at me and was like, you don't have any blood. You're good. He didn't shine a light in my eyes because I probably would have punched him because, it just hurt. And I went in my I went back and I went into where the command post. I just told my guys, I was like, look, I have this excruciating headache like I've never experienced. I'm going to take a quick nap. And my medic's like, that sounds like a concussion. I'm like, well, I'm going to take a nap and drink some water. So,
no. Always the catch-all fix. Just drink water. Everybody in the military.
And then you fast forward and you talk to the VA, and they're like, "How long were you out for?" I don't know, because when you come to a guy's yelling, "Sir, you okay? Sir, you okay?" Like shaking you, like that's not my natural recovery to, so. And that it's a frustration I always have with the VA, and I talk with several veterans about it. It's like I don't quantify, like people who get knocked out. There are vehicles that got thrown into the water. They come to because they're driving on the road, they get knocked out, or the ID goes off, they get knocked out, the vehicle gets blown into a river. The water wakes them up, hopefully. And like in December, that water's cold, or January, February, some of the coldest nights of my life. We're there in Ramadi next to the river in the winter. That water's 35, 40 degrees. It's going to wake you up naturally. Like, oh, shit. Now I'm in the water. Now I got to react. That didn't happen to me, but I had several friends that got their vehicles blown into water sources and they woke up. So.
It's, it is. It's tough to know how long you're out for. You just know.
It is. And I always say that. I was like, I didn't have hold on, I think we're an ID. Let me start my stopwatch. Yeah. Okay. Boom.
We looked down at my watch.
Look, 17 seconds. I was on this day, I was out for 17 seconds. No, that's, it's combat. You've got other stuff. And I got to start going again. I got to do my job. I got to carry my weight because I'm not a shooter. Right. And I'll be honest with you. I never fired a bullet in combat. That wasn't my job. Now, did I clear rooms? 100%. We got a mounted mission where some Bradleys show up. They're like, hey, we're going to take you here. Okay, I'm track number 2. Let the other vehicle out. Okay, got it. Track 2. Hey, all right. All of a sudden, ramp drops. Me, my FO, and my 240 gunner. And it's like, shit, there's no one else around. All right, let's go in. Let's establish that foothold. And then wait for the other guys. Like, we established the foothold. Let's let them clear the rest of the house because the 3 of us are not shooters. But I tell people to shoot people? Absolutely. Hey, 240 gunner, that guy right there, shoot him. He's shooting at us. Engage. Are you sure? Yes. See those bullets coming at us? Shoot him. So, some people say I was never in combat because I openly admit I never shot anybody in the face. I guess that somehow makes my combat experience less. I don't know. But again, society doesn't really know. I mean, I've had people tell me that the Green Beret program ended in Nam and I was a liar. And it's like, okay, man, that Green Beret and the Yarborough knife and everything I did for 18 months, the Q course, I guess that was all just figment of my imagination. So,
I always question those motives of people who try to malign others' combat experience. And look, full disclosure, there are some people who have been on this show because this show is about combat and survival. Like that's kind of the purpose of it. Who never really, saw combat. And I'll get an email from somebody saying, why'd you have this person on? They weren't in combat. And I'm saying that, look, in order to survive a deployment, right, there is, no matter how small your piece of the pie, you need the whole pie to make it whole, right? Everybody has a small piece of it, whether it's the mail clerk, whether it's, somebody with food, whether it's somebody just doing laundry, whatever it is, all those things that it contribute to your survival on some level are important parts of combat. Look, I didn't take a bunch of my folks outside the wire for their own safety. I just said I didn't feel like they were mentally equipped to handle it. And there were plenty of my folks who asked, can I go? Can I go? Can I go? And I'm like, well, let's find the right situation for you to go. Like and that wasn't to minimize their combat experience. It was to keep them alive, knowing what they were going to be up against down the road. So I don't malign anybody's combat experience. It's theirs. It's personal to them, whatever it may be. And it.
Oh, I think you bring up a valid point. Soft truths, right? Well, the last one is soft forces typically need conventional support or other support. Same thing, right? Like my wife was in Baghdad at Fob Rustamaya. She was sending out speedballs, quick ammunition resupplies to guys in the fight. Does that lessen what she did in combat? Absolutely not, because those guys might not know it was my wife's unit that did it, but you know what they did? They requested ammo, they got it, and they were able to keep engaging the enemy.
Yep.
And so it's like a lot of people, logistics win wars 100%. Like you can go back to World War II and study like what stopped Patton's advance into Germany? Fuel.
Yeah.
100%. And in Africa, it's fuel, right? So like to downplay and that's my big thing, and that was the big thing I always tried to push in my nonprofit was like, look, I don't care what you did in the military because you raised your right hand and you did more than 99.5% of the population. Whether you were passing out towels at Balad or you were out closing with and kicking in doors and doing breaches and all this, cool guy stuff, whatever, but just own it. Like, man, I was a cook on the USS Enterprise. Awesome, man. I hope you made the best pancakes ever. But just own it. But don't try to be something you weren't. Like, yeah, just because you fed SEALs on one mission, that doesn't make you a SEAL. Just because you went out with the Green Berets on a mission, that doesn't make you a Green Beret. But so just be you. Like, man, I shot a ton of artillery in support of dudes, and I am grateful for that. Like, I am truly grateful for all the artillery dudes that I never met that put bombs on target.
It's funny you say that. I kept a journal my first deployment, and the last page, nobody's ever read it. I barely even gone back and reread it myself. But the last page is the only thing I ever share with anybody, and that was some of the things that I had learned or affirmed, or some lessons that I take away. And look, I spent 15 months in that first deployment on a B team, right, of an ODA in the Sports Center, handling all the logistics for the not only the Iraqi side of the house, but the American side of the house. And yeah, I was in combat and firefights and everything else, but it's not anything that, separates me from anybody else. But one of the things I go back to say is that one of the greatest lessons I've learned from that deployment was the enjoyment of being a role player. You don't have to be the superstar in order for the team to be good. I was a role player. I embraced the role. I've said repeatedly on this show, the only reason I know that people valued me is because they kept asking me. Green Berets kept coming to me for more work. Yeah, I need you to do this. That's the only reason I knew that I was doing well, is because they kept coming back to me, because I learned very quickly. If I didn't, no one ever tell me I screwed up. They just kind of walk around you and keep going to find somebody else who could. And so, I took a lot of joy and a lot of pride in being a role player. And like you said, did I get taken out on missions? Sure. Would I ever purport myself to be a Green Beret? No, not for a second. I didn't do any of that stuff. So I'm not bashful.
You probably got to go to the range with those guys, or your who has got to go to the range with them and learn something. And the second and third order effects, you never know what they're going to be. Maybe some of you guys eventually, tried out, raised their hand, and did that double volunteer where they volunteered for airborne school and special operations. Or they knew somebody that did based on the conversation. So like, that's how I tried to treat, that's how I tried to plan missions, as second and third order effects of like, yes, we're going out to kill and capture this one person or these two people. But along the way, like, I don't want to do anything that creates more insurgents. And B, I want these people to think like, okay, we don't understand each other verbally. Iraqi Arabic's a lot different than the modern standard Arabic that I studied. But if I can communicate, through body language, all those things, and, let people see my eyes, then maybe they see that I'm not the devil. I'm not some evil. I'm just a person doing my job, trying to help them, so that one day people like me no longer have to be in their area, and they can open up the pharmacies and the drink shops and the ice cream shops and the fresh food market, all those things again. They can go back to normal. Just how, if I were in their situation, I would want, Red Dawn type of situation here in America. I would want to, fight to protect my family and then get back to how it was before.
All right. So you get back from that deployment. Obviously you have more time as a PL with the infantry. What do you get back sometime in 07, I assume? Late 07? Yeah,
we got back in December 2007.
At what point in time does assessment and selection work its way in? Did you know, were you predetermined that's where you were going?
So this is a thing of having always getting a good partner in life, and the person you marry is the most important thing. So after I got back in December, I mean, I was burnt out, like 15 months, almost 15 months, kinetic, a lot of it going on. I lost two of my guys, um, which was the darkest point of my life. Right after that, kind of had to reset myself, and just my wife had to have a conversation. So I think my packet was due sometime in January. I think maybe let's just say January 31st, whenever it was, of 2008. And I was like, man, do I do it? Do I do it? And she's like, this is what you've always wanted to do. Like, apply, they don't select you, great. Then at least you can't go back, look back. And I was kind of was long term. So really, she was taking my words, something I'd said to her, and flipping it and saying it to me. But it sounded different because it was kind of, it's like, okay, great, you're tired, go out, try out, because you'll have regrets later if you don't. And so I applied. I started running again, and I applied. And then fast forward June of 2008, I'm at selection, at Special Forces Assessment Selection. We have the guy die due to heat casualty, but they say it was a snake bite. And there was some of us in there. We hadn't had water they'd taken our water away. We'd been out doing land nav. Guy has a heat exhaustion, succumbs to it. Because, they hadn't run selection in June for a reason for several years, because it's hot. And then, we'd been up for 3-4 days. So they're like, well, we don't really know. It seemed like they were just figuring stuff out. They were figuring out the 2-week selection course. They were figuring out summer, like, how do we overcome heat casualties, all these things. And then fast forward, guy dies. And then, we don't have rank, right? We have a roster number, 6'9". We have white engineer tape sewed on, and roster number on there. And, cadre comes like, all right, let's go look for this dude. And, someone's had to step up and be like, hey, Sergeant, look, I'm going to break rank. I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Army. We haven't had water, and everybody here's out of water. Like, I get it. We're looking for one of our brothers who's lost out there on the Q course. But if you don't get us some water, we are going to have more people. And, fortunately, the cadre we had was like, shit, you guys don't have water? So stuff just started trickling down, right? And, and it just kind of confirmed everything I've ever done of like, if you don't ask, the answer is no. And did I have to break rank? I could have went up, but, being me, I just felt that me and another officer, one of my classmates from West Point, went up, and we broke rank and said, hey, look, yes, I'm first lieutenant promotable, Ben Bateman, whatever, get my guys water. I'm seeing issues of heat, the impacts of heat. And if we're going out for undetermined time, like, I don't want these guys to succumb to heat related issues. And they got us water, and they started, I think it kind of woke people up. But doing the right thing,
yeah,
did it cost me anything? I don't know. Maybe they're like, oh shit, this person's willing to maybe I got selected simply because of that. Not saying I'm awesome, just I didn't quit.
Well, again, there's two sides to that coin. Like you said, some people will say you should broke rank, doesn't matter what it is. Those are the rules. You need to learn to follow them. Other people will say right thing is the right thing, and you do the right thing. The right thing is never hard. So
sometimes it is. Sometimes it's hard. And as you know, leadership's a lonely island sometimes. When you're by yourself, you're just stuck there. And, and a quick story, like, I remember, like, we'd get back from the mission, we'd do clean weapons, shower, whatever, prepare. And it's like, all right, I don't have a mission plan tomorrow, or we're going to go on fob security, or we're about to go on mission platoon. Nothing hard. I'm just going to relax, right? Like, I'm going to go hang out with the boys for a little bit. And I'd walk in there, and, they'd be playing Halo on Xbox, and like, so you want to play? And I'd play a little bit. But about 10, 20, 30 minutes in, they'd be like, he's still here, right? Like, it was just different. Like, I was me with the guys, but the same guys I had no issues saying, like, hey, go in that room. We're taking fire from the building. Get your ass in there, close with it, destroy the enemy. But I would have done the same thing. That was their job. I was doing my job, orchestrating the chaos.
Yeah. Once you finish assessment and selection, you head off to the Q course.
Well, they were.
Go ahead.
The Army was dealing with the backlog of the surge and the impact that it had. So I actually had 6 months back at Fort Carson waiting for the next captain's career course. So I just got back and, nursed my wounds, recovered from selection, recovered from, the trauma on the body. I mean, for like 2-3 weeks, I only swam because my body was just tired and it just hurt to walk. And so my PT was swimming and then trying to get back into shape. And then my unit's gearing up to go to Afghanistan. I'm a quitter because I'm leaving the infantry. I become the battalion S1 because they wanted to punish me and make me change my mind. Which didn't work, but whatever. I'm committed.
I'm going to punish you to change your mind. Yeah,
that's right. If you change your mind, you can go be the AS3, like hard pass. I'm like, no. And then so I wait 6 months and I work a job and then I got to do some OJT with 10th group since I was at Fort Carson. So it was pretty fun. I got to go, kind of see what it's like on an ODA before I'd gone through a Q course. Spent a couple months in language school. I got a 0+0+, so I had to do all of the 6-month language course. I volunteered for Arabic.
Didn't you already take Arabic?
I'd taken 2 years of Arabic at West Point, but it was rusty. And then when I was in Iraq, it was just confirmation. I was like, man, my Arabic sucks. Even though I was trying to use it. But again, it's a different dialect.
Listen, I picked up a ton of it over the course of a year.
Yeah.
Like I was able to get through meetings with my Iraqi soldiers for the most part on my own. Which was good, but the one time I left my interpreter was the one time I got into the shit and needed an interpreter. So my Arabic was good enough to tell them, get us the fuck out of here. And that was about it. But anyway, I digress. So once you get to group, where do you end up?
I went to a 3rd group. So Married Army Couples Program, my wife PCS to Bragg. She was going to do the Civil Affairs program. And Married Armor's couple program, we just spent 22 months doing the whole Geo Bachelor, or as I like to tell people, the National Guard marriage, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. So like we wanted to be together. My wife had decided that she was supposed to go to Sapper School and then SEER School. Well, the Army flipped that, and she went to SEER School. So her body was completely broken down. She graduated SEER out of Fort Rucker, Alabama. And then 4 days later, she starts at Sapper School, grueling, physically challenging course. I'm not a graduate of Sapper School. I went to Ranger School, but I know what they do is, physically challenging. And I know the 5-mile run, like 48 hours after I finished my time in the box at SEER School, was some of the most challenging things. So it went all the way up to the G1 of the Army, who said, nope, Ben, if you want to be cohabited with your wife, you'll switch to 3rd group, even though the 10th group commander had found my wife a job and all the Army had to do was release her and my PCS entitlements would cover. But, everything happens for a reason. So,
yeah, I guess so. It's fun. I tell this to everybody who mentions it. SEER School is the one school in the military I wish I had gone to. I didn't know about it till I had deployed with Green Berets. If they would send me now, I'd go. It's the one school I just want to go.
It's a phenomenal school, and everything you have is, some of the most professional, best instructors I ever had. And I had some phenomenal instructors. Just the challenge that you have is that 800-pound gorilla, like, I'm going to be a POW for, 3 days. And so it's trying to get everything you can out of that and still remember it, knowing you have that fun resistance lab at the end. But 100%. It was one of the best courses. And I always tell people, if you don't know who you are coming out of Ranger School, or you don't know who you are coming out of challenging leadership courses, you will know who you are coming out of SEER School.
Yeah.
You'll know who pushes you. They'll find ways to break you. Your weaknesses will come out. It's a truly phenomenal course to know you.
I wish they would send everybody to it, to be honest with you.
I
think right there with AIT, just do it.
I felt the same way. Obviously, that would, I think, it's great on paper. I mean, I was in Ranger School when General Casey was the chief of staff of the Army. When, that time, he's like, every officer needs to go Ranger School. Well, that's great, but logistically, how do we make that happen? Because we can only train so many hulas, which means infantry guys aren't always going to get the chance. The infantry lieutenants are expected to show up in certain units with that tab, with that piece of cloth, won't get a chance because other branches, right? Like in my squad, I had quartermaster, I had transportation officers, I had other things, but did they need it? 100%. Could those skills that they did save lives? Absolutely. But when I'm looking at my peers that are infantry who are expected to show up with that tab, and they don't get a shot because there's 550 people competing for 300 slots or whatever it is, then they have to show up, and then they're going to be treated as a second class officer until they get a chance to go back to Ranger School. So it's that balance. But same thing with SEER School. Like, who needs it? Combat arms guys, soft, but could the Army benefit if every single person went? Absolutely. I 100% agree with your thoughts there.
When you get to third group, what's your job there? I mean, how long? What do they make you do?
Yeah, so I showed up. I got to be the rear D commander for 3rd Battalion, 3rd Group for a year. So not my dream assignment, but I learned a tremendous amount from the sergeant major that I had that was getting med boarded, and the couple of E8s and E7s that just either were recovering. I mean, my HHC rear D sergeant major was a sergeant first class. He had just had a brain aneurysm like 6 months prior, and they put him in responsible for the HHC property book. So imagine the stress and the impact it had on this guy. So you see things, and then you build relationships, and you're undermanned and try to make everything happen. So I think kind of that like craftiness, do one more thing that we talked about earlier, was the same thing. Like, hey, I'm not downrange, but I'm going to support these guys to the best of my ability. I'm going to talk with the wives. We had meetings. I'd talk about post-traumatic stress. I got read on to a program so I could talk to a guy who was getting ready to go on his 11th deployment he was the team sergeant of a specialty team, and like it just broke him. And so, like all these things, again, everything I've done in life, I continue to like take, and if I can apply that skill set, I use it in other things. And a lot of that time on rear D, I utilized both to heal myself, but also to help heal other warriors. And those were what set the conditions for success for founding my nonprofit.
We'll get to that. I know you get one more deployment with the Green Berets, right? As a team.
Yeah. So it was outside of Afghanistan. We were prepping for the eventual withdrawal of Afghanistan, and it was in. I'll just tell you flat, I was in Tajikistan, but myself and another captain, we came up with kind of like the regional long-term plan, because if you study that area, when the Soviet Union fell and they pulled out of the stands of Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, those 6 stands, that it went into a civil war afterwards. Like most of the 90s was a civil war in those countries. And so we wanted to help prevent that from happening. And so coming up with a long-term strategic plan is pretty awesome. And then, the people we were training with, it was a fun mission, right? Like it wasn't a kinetic mission, but at the same time, it's equally as important. So never downgrade. Like I like to remind people when they start talking about Marcus Luttrell and Lone Survivor, what's never mentioned is that there was a Green Beret team that did an assessment on that village, and they had a good list and a bad list. And when Muhammad whatever made a call to the Americans and said, "Hey, I've got an American SEAL, come get him. What's your name? Oh, he's on the good list. Yeah, let's trust him." That was Green Berets that validated it. So you never know what those second, third order effects are going to be, but Marcus Luttrell's alive today because some Green Beret had met with this dude and gave him the thumbs up. And when he made the call, Americans sent everything they could to go get him.
Yeah, Muhammad Gulab, I think was his
Muhammad name. Gulab. There you go. All I can remember was Muhammad, but that's like 80% of the Middle East, anyways.
It's the most common name ever. Just ask McLovin. Anyway, but we digress. So I'm just kind of curious. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. You worked on this exit plan for Afghanistan, only for 9-10 years later to watch it be foobarred. Uh,
Yeah, it was hard.
yeah, I was
And
going to say that
it's
must have.
very hard. And one of my buddies from the career course was that Marine battalion commander that lost his 12, 13. It
Really?
was it was a shit show. Like if I could go back to anything one thing, I would do that. I'd be commander in chief for one day. And we know, like I know the terrain of Afghanistan. I studied Afghanistan. I just never had the opportunity to go there. I studied the people. I read, the graveyard of empires. It was where Alexander the Great forces ended. And most of those people, I mean, if you think the Gans aren't a warrior force, you're wrong. They are better. They are more lethal, engaging with precision fire than Iraqis are. So it's a different one. But again, it goes back to we failed. Afghanistan kept going because we picked a team much like Iraq, and other tribes kept fighting us because we weren't giving them money. They weren't getting a cut. We support the Northern Alliance. We could have our own podcast on that, but we had an opportunity to completely decimate the Taliban as they were going from, just like we could have done that in Iraq when the ISIS uprising. But as they're in this mountainous valley, you put a couple, fighter pilots in F-16s, F-15s. They're in a valley. You cut off the lead vehicle and the rear vehicle, and then you just send in the bombers and just let them annihilate them. There's no threat in Afghanistan. There's no Taliban presence that undermined. And guess what? The Americans, our brothers and sisters who lost their brothers and sisters over there, they wouldn't be feeling bad right now about, like, just like us Iraqi veterans felt in 2014 when it fell to ISIS. They wouldn't have this burden of like, why did I survive, or was it worth it? And it gets into more that moral element of PTS. Not as bad as like the Vietnam brothers and sisters that got spit on and called baby killers, but it's pretty close up there.
Yeah. I will get to the sort of moral part of this in a minute here. I'm curious, when your time at the, in the military ends, or at least in the Green Berets, I should rephrase it. How did you know you wanted to be done? Was it was it a wife thing? Was it just, or you had?
It was all the above. So I went to one of my best friends who was the other captain with me on the deployment. His dad died while we were doing the outbrief down at Sox End, and I went to his funeral. Like this guy was like a second father to me. I learned a tremendous while I was at West Point. I'd go up, I'd spend time, and just like seeing him interact with my friend and his kids, like I learned a tremendous amount from him. And he died, and my grandfather had died on that deployment. My wife had a miscarriage on that deployment. All these things, like subconsciously, I was going to the funeral, and it was to support my best friend, one of my best friends, but it was for me too. It was a closure of everything that happened on that deployment, and I got in trouble for it. And then my wife's office mate, who eventually became her boss while she was he worked in a special mission unit, and he told me I should try out. And so I started working out again after that deployment. And one of my cadre from the Q course, the 7th class, was responsible for the team or platoon, whatever you want to call it, motley crew of Q course students. He saw me working out one day, and he's like, these issues you have are from traumatic brain injury. It's not you're out of shape. So he kind of followed me for like 3 weeks, and every day it was like, "Sir, you have traumatic brain injury. Your issues that you're struggling with, it's not you're out of shape." He just kept doing that over and over for like 3 weeks. I'm like, "Fine, sir, I'll go to the traumatic brain injury clinic." And so I went to the clinic at the interview to see if I had traumatic brain injury from combat, and I said, hey, I did all the tests, like, yep, you have traumatic brain injury. And I was in outpatient for 8 months, just doing everything, all sorts of torture, learning about things. But it was good. It woke me up to show that, like, all the issues that I had, that's where it came from. Like, quick story, at Q course, you have to do pull-ups after like I think it was like a 6 or 8 mile, I don't know, the long run of 6, 7, 8 miles. I don't remember exactly how long it was. But I remember I was like, we had to do pull-ups, and I'm just sitting there waiting, and like I'd stand up, I'd get dizzy, I'd sit back down. So finally it gets down to where the Q course cadre are like, hey, all you quitters, just get up, get your 0 pull-ups so we can non-select you and go on your way. And so I'm like, all right, well, and the mental, like, I overcame it. I stood up, knock out like 17, 18. I don't know. Marines always say it's weak, but whatever. After like 4 days in the Q course, like 17, 18 pull-ups was pretty good. And the kids are like, Russ number 69, what's wrong with you? Said, nothing, Sergeant. I guess I just needed some water and some recovery after that run. But going back, it's like, oh, well, I have Meniere's syndrome. And my vestibular system, the balance system, my ears was destroyed. But all that makes sense now, right? And so I got to reflect on those things. And then I turned down a med board, and I just wanted out. I was tired. I was burnt out. I put my heart and soul into this, and I knew that it just, like, if I were to go back and be on a combat team, I'd be a distraction, or I'd be a liability. I wouldn't be an asset. And so it was just time to get out. And then I started doing open source intel, or doing the SF thing to find ways. That's how my wife and I got jobs at Goldman Sachs when I left the Army.
Wow. By the way, I didn't find out about my TBI until about 15 years after. I was having the same. I thought my dizzy spells forever were just lack of hydration.
Yeah. Well, I was like, man, I'm just like, I was in the top 1% of my class physically at West Point. Like I was fit, right? Like I had the mental fortitude to keep going. And I was saying, no, it's just who I was. Like, I could just push myself when my body's saying no. I'm like, all right, let's just pass this person. Let's just pass this person. And I would do that on runs. But it started being like, okay, you're out of shape. And then I would look at like what my scores, like on an APFT or 5 mile run, I'm like, but I'm not out of shape. I'm in phenomenal shape according to all these things, hitting personal records on different exercises. And it's like, okay, maybe there's something else. And that's when all that other stuff finally came to realization. So it's hard, like, you don't like, it's a hard time admitting. I mean, I openly admit that to people. They're like, oh, same people might call me a pussy, whatever. I don't care. Like, I have these issues, and I get to live with them for the rest of my life. Parts of my body are 80, 90 years old, and I'm 41. So I'm okay with that. I've adapted to my new 100%.
Know the feeling. I'm heading for my third last 4 years. So I've done enough damage to my body to ask for a point, but enough on me. So you go to the civilian world. How much transition was that for you?
It was a shock, right? And like, I come from being a Green Beret detachment commander. I was a senior American Grand Force commander in a country for 6 months. And then fast forward, I show up at Goldman, and they're like, what do we do with this guy? Go hang out with the new college grads. Just go figure it out, learn from them. I'm like, okay. So I'm there. And, I'm like day 3, and we're having, just like in the Army, Goldman's no different. Corporate America is no different. I'm having issues getting onto certain programs on my computer, so I can't do my job. And one of the team leaders comes up and was like, hey, we've got this stuff we're going to have to work this weekend. I'm like, I've given up a shitload of weekends. I had my 2 daughters were young. I mean, like, my younger daughter was like 6, 7 months old this time. I'm like, I'm not giving up my weekends. I've given up enough weekends in my life. I'm going to come up with a solution. I just always do one more thing. And then, so I go to the team leaders, have a meeting, and they're like, oh, we're going to have to work this weekend. We've got these issues. And, like, these are 4 or 5 years junior to me who've never led people. And I'm like, hey, if anything, if I can help mentor these people to be better leaders for these my peers and other members of the team, like, then I'm winning. I'm leveraging who I am for the team. And so I was like, hey, hold on a sec. What program is this? And, the team leader's like, oh, it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, who controls access? And she's like, we do. It's like, so you can give me access. And she's like, yeah, I can give you access 100%. I was like, okay, well, I've got nothing to do because these other programs that I'm supposed to be doing, I don't have access. So, and then I helped resource load. And I was like, hey, if there was like 10 of us, raise your hand if you're done with today's work. And, like 4 people raised their hand. I was like, okay, how long does it take to figure this stuff out? Like, oh, like 20, 30 minutes and you'll be proficient. I was like, okay, well, there's 5 of us now. So let's redistribute the workload. It's Friday morning. Let's redistribute the workload and come back together at lunchtime. People go lunch, come back together, and they're like, all right, the team leaders are looking at theirs because they've got other stuff that they're doing. They're like, oh, we're gonna have to work this weekend. We're not done. I was like, hold on, time out. I'm done. Who here is not done with the workload you've got to do? And everybody's like, I'm done. All right, let's redistribute the workload and let's get out of here. And some of the senior VPs are like, that's phenomenal. How'd you know how to do that? How'd you know how to step up? I'm like, that's what I did. Like, that was my job in the military, was identify a solution or identify a problem, come up with a solution, and task load to make it happen. Like, it wasn't, I didn't have to use too many brain cells to make it happen.
Somewhere along the way, you decide that you want to get a master's degree in explosives engineering. You only spent Goldman Sachs. I mean, obviously, I guess it just wasn't for you. Is it simple to say that?
Yeah, it just wasn't the right cultural fit.
But you end up at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. So what fascinated you about nuclear components and bomb making?
Well, in all honesty, I started I was running construction projects, and I felt like I was a national level asset, or maybe like at least on the JV team as a Green Beret, and I wanted to do more. And I kept meeting with other people who worked with SOF, who worked with other government agencies, who did all these other stuff at Los Alamos. And the resounding answer that I kept getting is like, Ben, that's great, you're a Green Beret, but you don't have a technical degree. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll go get one. I'll prove to you that, I can, I'm not just a pretty face, even though my grandma always told me I have a face for radio. But I would, so like, I'm never going to let an obstacle stop me. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll prove to you. I'll go get a master's degree. They're like, you need something in engineering. Why don't you go back and get a bachelor's? I'm like, I've already done a bachelor's, and because I went to West Point, I had a minor in mechanical engineering. I did physics. I did calculus, I had discrete dynamical systems, thermodynamics. I had all the prerequisites for this explosive engineering program. I just hadn't been in college for a while. And so I figured that would be the one that would set me up for success. And then while I was a construction project manager, I volunteered to be the chairman of the Veteran Employee Resource Group at Los Alamos National Lab. And in doing so, I met he was a Naval Academy grad who was responsible for the PIT mission, the nuclear weapons mission at Los Alamos. And I impressed him with my thought process and how I handled struggles and whatever. And he asked me to apply for the role. And so my last job there was I was a manufacturing manager, and we did the final assembly of nuclear weapons components at Los Alamos National Lab. But wow. By the way, I had 4 kids. I'm working a full-time job, and so I just made it happen. Right? Like, I prioritized my kids were young, so we could put them to bed, and rather than go and relax, I'd go do some study and design an explosive blast or study explosives of how it handles water, whatever. Just made it happen.
That's great. Here's a bottle of milk. I'm going to go build a bomb. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Yeah. It's not lost on me. After, and I neglected to mention, at least time-wise, chronologically, after you leave Goldman Sachs is when you start Sportsmen for Warriors, right? You have this non.
That's 100%. Yep.
What you want to start, and you've echoed some of the sentiments about why you wanted to do it before, kind of to give back. Obviously, to all those who were there for you, but the kind of mission statement is what?
to the off the record mission statement is give America back a better product than what they're getting when they leave the military. Right? Like these men and women have done phenomenal things that most people who've never served will never understand. And that skill set and mindset change, if we can get them to change from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth, like those things that you did fundamentally changed you, but in a good way. Like, yes, you can, if you can get to like, hey, nobody in this boardroom is going to shoot at me and I can just be me and say whatever, then that corporation is going to get a tremendous amount of knowledge out of people. And so our job was to employ, enrich, and engage. And the enrichments were what we took warriors out on. You know, we did everything from salmon fishing in Alaska. We took warriors on the tuna.com from Wicked Tuna on National Geographic or Nat Geo or Discovery Channel. We did 2 shark dives with great whites. I mean, the enrichment, that was just the excuse to get people together. And I think that's why I felt the need, because I knew there were other programs that were out there that were taking warriors on hunts, that were taking warriors on fishing trips, they're taking warriors doing cool stuff, but they didn't have the warrior element. And for us, it takes warrior to heal a warrior. And so, you know, I kind of reached back in my back pocket, like, okay, I've got this person for 24 hours or 48 hours or however long I've got them. How can I accelerate? How can I go, you know, to use kind of something everybody will, how do I go from first date to now we're talking about getting married in this short period of time? Well, how do you build bonds? How do you build relationships? You put like-minded people together. So, you know, and we went all exclusively off of nominations. So like if I get say a young Marine infantryman from who is in Fallujah, all right, now I'm going to start reaching out to other people. You know, maybe somebody donates, all right, you can bring five warriors on this salmon fishing trip. Okay. Now I'm going to find other people who have similar situations. So like you were in Ramadi in 2006. I was in Ramadi in 2006, right? Like that might be the two, I might put us 2 together on an event because now we're going to be, oh, you were at Crigador. I was at Blue Diamond or, you know, whatever outpost. Now we have this connection. Now we can go much faster in this acceleration. And then it's just having those conversations. And, you know, a lot of it was me opening up and talking about things. But I would know whether I had the conversation or other of my team would have conversations. I would kind of know this person. And I would know like, okay, this person's issue is they were blown up. They had an IED. Okay. Or, man, this person's been in a tremendous amount of contact. I can like tell all my stories to get them to start talking. Or, okay, this person's okay, now I need to use an ID because right, I was a Green Beret. I've been in a lot of firefights. Like I can't, it's having that balance of like, I'll open up, showing my vulnerability, but not saying too much to be like, oh, I didn't do anything, you know? And some people feel that way, like, oh, well, I was just a fueler. I was a mechanic on whatever. Right? Like we met this guy at one of our fundraisers. He went Signal. He was a young enlisted Signal guy working at a FOB because his mom and stepdad, if I remember correctly, didn't want him to go outside the wire and have him be killed. Well, what happens? He's on an outpost. Mortar lands right at his feet, takes his legs off. I mean, he's a above the knee amputee, right? Because he did what his parents wanted because he wanted to be safe, right? Like, does that negate that dude's story? Not at all. But this guy gets to live with those things. And I mean, he's at like the hip level amputation. And so it's just having those, you know, the balance and from what I learned working and, you know, I was read onto a program so I could talk to a guy about what he did. But he was going through a program. I'm like, okay, I'm going to leverage that experience. And I'm going to, you know, talk. And then I started studying the native warring tribes. I started studying, okay, what's the difference between World War I and World War II and Vietnam and Korea to fast forward to now, Iraq 2.0 or Afghanistan. What's the difference? Okay, it's talking, you know, like the World War II veterans, they came back on boats, and they got to talk through everything, right? Like they laughed, they cried, they did all that stuff because they're on a boat for 6 weeks. What else do they have to do? And so I'm like, if those guys who are really kind of the gold standard for how veterans should be, let's do that. And then, talking with the Vietnam veterans, and they're like, man, I couldn't talk because either I'd spit on, I'd be called a baby killer. I'd talk to my dad, who was a World War II veteran, and he just told me to suck it up, but not knowing that he had worked through those same exact issues because he was on a boat. And nowadays, it's like you can go from Iraq or Afghanistan and be back in the States in 24 hours. There's no decompression. There's none of that. So how do we fix that? And so just trying to, piecemeal all these different things. And I'm not a psychologist, but I know people. I know how to lead people, and kind of coming up with just like a good young team leader and infantry squad leader would do, or good NCO in the Army would do. Like, okay, here's your problem. Let's do counseling. Let's come up with the 30, 60, 90-day plan for you. Same exact thing. And what people don't realize, and it gets into our other pillars, is you might interview me for a job and I might say everything right, but there's just something like, I don't know what it is about Ben. There's just something off. And maybe, subconsciously I'm thinking about during this interview, I'm thinking about like, oh man, it reminds me of, when my guys were killed or whatever. And so I might be projecting something subconsciously that you pick up on. You don't know what it is. And you're like, nah, let's pass on Ben. He had good answers, but there's just something I don't quite feel right. And so again, we're trying to fix these warriors and educate them. And then, at the end of each mission, I'd ask basically a few simple things like pay it forward. Like if you know another brother or sister in arms, either help out, reach out to them, have those conversations, or nominate them to us, a nonprofit, if you think we did good, or other nonprofits that help them out. And then be that, like, find your new why, find your new purpose, find your new mission, because a lot of veterans struggle with that. And then whatever that is, be the best you can be, like be all you can be. So like if you're a soccer coach, of like Little League soccer, and go be that, so that everybody's like, man, Ben's a phenomenal soccer coach. He teaches differently. There's something different about him. And they're like, oh, did you know he's a veteran? Rather than veteran coming up in a negative connotation, having veteran come up as a positive thing. So now we're setting a good example, and society's like seeing, here's something counter to what the news is saying of we're all broken toys, right? Like here's a functioning member, or start a business, or run for office, or whatever it is that like that's you go do it and do the best you, so that America continues to get a great product, because everything you learn in combat benefits you.
Yeah, very well said. A lot of stuff that we've echoed before. I'm curious though. I've been holding on to this since you mentioned it, and I want to go back to it because it transitions well into what Sportsmen for Warriors does. You mentioned losing two of your guys is one of the darkest days of your life, or the darkest day of your life. Two-part question. What made it so dark, and how is Sportsmen for Warriors, or at least the idea of what you're trying to do, helped you deal with that?
Yeah. So, it's a deep question. So I felt I failed, right? Like I lost my guys. I felt I failed. Looking back, and everyone armchair quarterbacks themselves and tries to look, and it's, and again, this is what we teach in the nonprofits. Like I know the answer because I've already been through it. I have to go back to what did I do leading up to it? And so quick story. It was out on a road that I refused to ever go on. My battalion commander was coming back from whatever battalion command briefing. They hit an IED. It was an area that we knew, and why I refused to go on it was we knew there were IEDs because it was a blind spot for us. And, we were the nearest element. I'm coordinating between his element and my element, and I'm talking to our battalion talk for a little while, and my guys go out and they hit an ID, and two guys are killed instantly. And I just felt for a long time that it was my fault. Their lives was my fault. And, and I would always hear people afterwards say like, yeah, I went to combat, I didn't lose a guy because I'm awesome. And, like it angered me for a while.
God.
And, like, I mean, I wasn't openly advertising I lost 2 guys. But it's just one of those things where you're like, okay, well, I know the stuff I was in, but I worked through it, right? Like I could have quit. I could have gone and volunteered to be the XO and they would have put somebody else in my job. I didn't. I went back and I AR'd. Okay. Yes, we knew it was bad. I had the conversation with those guys like, drive slow. If something feels wrong, stop. All those things. But there's greater power that's in control. I'm a devout Christian, and I was proved to in life that I'm here talking to you because, like, when my squad leader got shot on December 4th, I should have got shot. Fast forward, I come back to Firebase a couple hours later or a couple weeks later, and I have a message that my grandfather died. And I later, like 5-6 years later, actually, no, it was after I was out of the Army. I went back and I did the time conversion. And when I was ambushed was about the same time my grandfather was, he passed away. So I guess God had felt that like my family had already lost one person and shouldn't lose 2 on the same day. And then, so I worked through that. And my oldest son's named after the 2 guys I lost, Rowan and Travis. And I think I probably used the nonprofit, but I wanted to help people. I wanted to give back. I wanted to show people it's okay. When I cry on enrichments. I open up. I show everything. I talk to people, and I don't hold back. And whether it's a public speaking event or whatever, I'm unfiltered. I'm not politically correct. I tell the truth how I see it, and I try to give people the real honest truth and the warrior way. And for other warriors, I try to, I see national security issues in our country, whether it's education, whether it's the control of, 3 companies that control 88% of the financial of the S&P 500, whether it's the out of touch octogenarians that are ruling our country, or not ruling, maybe that's not the right term, but making decisions for our country. All these things are national security issues. And the second, third order effects we're all facing from them. And I'm trying to give America a better product and in a small way help. The whole analogy of the boy who's throwing the crabs back in the ocean. His grandfather says, "Why are you doing that? You can't save them all." And he says, "No, but for the ones I can save, it's everything." And there's the same way. Will we save everybody? No. I mean, we lost a guy who'd gone through one of our things on the suicide, but we've saved people. We've had people who, were ready to do it, and they just happened to get nominated and change their life. I mean, we've saved marriages. It's for that one person and their sphere of influence. If I can save that one person, I mean, I'll move heaven and earth to make it happen, just like what others did for me in Iraq and in other deployments and other training events.
Where are you with it all now? I mean, do you have a certain level of peace with it?
I have. I've come to grips. I think, like talking with Travis's mom, I think it was 2012. I was always scared to call. And so finally on the anniversary, I called her. She said, "Ben, it wasn't your fault. It was God's plan. He needed Travis's sense of humor." And, it's the same thing. Like, I can think about the horrific aspects of those days, but instead I forced myself to think of the positive things. Like, I remember Travis, he would always, like, before, I didn't know it at the time. I just remember he'd fall out of PT. But he would fall out of PT when it was platoon PT, when I was leading it, because every night before he'd do a 12-pack of Budweiser, he called it the Budweiser Challenge. He'd drink a 12-pack, he'd show up to PT drunk, and then, do the best he could. And so I try to remember those things. Or I remember, like, the day I met Rowan, he was my medic. We were at NTC, obviously we were undermanned, and I walk in and I had just got, like, my new platoon sergeant. It was my 3rd platoon sergeant at the time, and I'd been a platoon leader for like almost 3 months at the time. And I walk in and my platoon sergeant, "Hey, you gotta come meet the medic. He just got here." And I walk up and he's got his cot and he's trying to give himself an IV in the hand. He's bleeding all over the place. He's like, "Stop." stops what he's doing. He's like, his hand's still bleeding because he has the tourniquet on, and he's trying to give himself an IV. And he's like, "Hey," he like stands up to shake my hand. It's like, "Finish what you're doing, man! Like, you're crazy." But that was him. That was Rowan, and so that's why I was trying to. That's why I try to embody, and then, you know, honest transparency. So I also had a brother who passed away who had muscular dystrophy. Who, when he passed away when I was 10, I remember one of the last memories I had of him was my parents had a van that had a ramp lift. I remember that for some reason it wouldn't start. He wanted to go to school, and so he drove to school in the rain with my mom, or my mom walked with him to school. He was in junior high, and in the rain, he made it to school because that's what I wanted to do. So when I was at selection, I was cold or tired or hungry, I remembered back to either my brother or, you know, Rowan had wanted to, when we got back from Iraq, he wanted to go be a 18 Delta, right, in the Special Forces. I always tease him. I was like, they're going to make you a Bravo because you've already got medical skills. You're cross-trained. You're going to be a Bravo. And then Travis wanted to go Ranger School. So I always remember, you know, when I was feeling tired or I didn't have energy at selection, I just think back to the positives of those guys. Like, I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing this for, you know, when I graduated the Q course and finally donned that Green Beret, it wasn't, I put it on not just for me. There were so many others that I put it on for. And I try to just continue to do that mission today.
It's the best way to honor them.
Yeah, exactly.
Objectively.
Because they, you know, they say people die when people stop saying the name. And, you know, my son gets, we say their names every day, sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah. I think it's fitting, you know, and part of one of the things that, you know, recurring themes that comes up is I always ask about those folks because they deserve to be heard, you know, their voices, but that doesn't mean we have to.
And, you know, the sad part of society is they only want to talk about SEALs and special operations, and they only want to, but, you know, the people I respect the most are like I always say Louisiana, I don't know why, Louisiana National Guard. I should probably say New Mexico National Guard since we're 51st in the nation in education, but those people who raise their right hand because they wanted to do something, they wanted to serve, and they go out in combat. They don't have all the assets stacked. They don't have all the resources. They don't have the best equipment because, you know, either the state doesn't have money or whatever. But you know what? They go on, then they do missions and they do the best of their training and experience. And they're all part of the team, right? Like we have the surgical units who are going out and taking out the head of the snake, but we need the other guys and gals to take out the IED and placers and those things. And it's all part of the bigger mission.
Never I'm at Fort Stewart because I'm here in Atlanta and I have to go down to Stewart for training events and things of that nature. I don't always get to do it, but, you know, at a minimum once every 6 months, whether I take my soldiers with me or I just go alone. But they have these walks where they planted all these trees for all the 3ID soldiers who were killed in action. And I even took my kids there once and walked with them.
My guys are on that list. They're on one of those.
Yeah.
Because we were attached to 3rd ID.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow. I'll have to go check out the trees in their honor. And which is, it's always just striking me, you know, I just like to read the names and see what people leave behind. And, you know, just remember that, you know, there were so many people who, you know, made the ultimate sacrifice. It's so touching and moving. It's emotional for me. And I didn't even know some of these folks. So I can only imagine if I did know them, how difficult it would be.
Well, and, you know, we talk about that and people always say like, what is it? You know, like people often reference like sports, and I give sports analogies because it's often different. Like I always say, I'm the quarterback, give me the ball, I'll get in the end zone, right? Because most civilians understand that, but like it's the little things that will change things. Like you know, we're in engagement in Iraq, and you know, like we're facing significant enemy. And like, hey guys, I'll come on the net and hey, Apaches are inbound, and it just changes people. Or hey, QRF's inbound. Why? Because it's just showing, and people know that like, okay, somebody's coming to help, somebody's coming to our aid, and the impact that has, like knowing, you know, like yeah, my guys died going out on the medevac, Kazovac type of mission, But my guys would continue to do that because they know somebody else will come for them if they're ever blown up or they're ever there. Unless it's immediate, we're going to do all we can. I'm going to move heaven and earth to make sure they get a chance, and we're going to fight to make sure they come home.
Great message. Love it. And I think, in general, just the processing of it that you've all done is reflective of, I think what some of your nonprofit is about. But it's also a process that a lot of people can emulate and use. So,
100%. And if people want to, talk to me, I'll give them the secret sauce. It's not that challenging. But also, the lesser known one was, we're trying to bridge that civil military divide, that civil military gap. You don't have to have ever served to understand combat, and you'll never fully understand. I mean, there's situations I'm like, man, I've been in engagements that's like, man, that's some crazy stuff you did. But it's like, how hard is it to look at a map and see where Iraq is? How hard is it to look at a map and see where Afghanistan is? Like, you don't have to memorize it. Like, if you look at Afghanistan, you don't have to memorize it and be like, oh, here's Kabul, here's Kandahar, here's whatever. It's okay. I don't know where that was. Where were you? Oh, you're in the south. How far were you from Pakistan? Oh, you're in the east. How far were you from Pakistan? Oh, you're in the north. Were you closer to Afghanistan, or were you closer to Tajikistan, or were you closer to Iran? Right? Like, having that would fundamentally change that conversation. Would fundamentally change somebody's mind. Be like, wow, this person. Here's that American who's not that stereotypical ugly American. They've looked at a map and they at least can find Afghanistan on the map, and I bet if they could go back, they could see it. And I think that's the challenge. And then, and I know we're short on time, but having people want to fundamentally change the questions they ask, like, what's it like to get shot at, or what's it like to kill somebody? Because everybody wants to have this conversation. It's like, what was it like being away for Christmas, right? Like, those are. I mean, I always, again, I'm not the most PC person, so I always tell people, like, well, you would never ask a person what it's like when they were raped or when they lost their child. Why would you ask somebody something that's that significant to them? Because it can change things. And I was, and again, this goes to the engagement of, okay, say you and I have a conversation, right? You ask me what's it like to kill somebody. And either A, now I feel like you pulled my man card. I'm like, oh shit, what do I do? And so I say something like, well, I think Ben lied there. Maybe I'm uncomfortable with it, or maybe I haven't fully processed it, and now I'm going to go start processing it. And maybe it's like, I had one of my real good friends from high school. He always teased me because I was in JRTC, but after 9/11, he joined up. He was an infantryman in 10th Mountain. He went to Afghanistan, and the Afghans or Taliban or Al Qaeda, whoever it was, put a suicide vest on a young girl. He shot her because he was protecting his squad, but he always lived with it. And that's what ended up why he took his life. Because when you're out of that situation, like, the people who go into the military go into it and our values get enhanced. It's a certain demographic of people. And I'm not saying race, it's a demographic of people who have beliefs, like, I'm going to fight for those who aren't strong enough to fight for themselves. I'm going to protect women as a man because that's what I believe. That's how I was raised. And so now you have this person who, might have shot a young girl, and they feel they're okay with it at the time, but they get away from that element. They get away from that organization. And now they have this, this debt on their life. They have this dark spot where they forget why they did it. They forget about their brothers and sisters to the left or right. They just remember, I killed a girl, and it goes back to their values, and they feel violated, and it just eats at them and eats at them. And the average person doesn't understand, like, okay, why? What? I don't understand. Like, you did it, it's whatever. I mean, shit, we were on a retreat in Alaska, and I was talking about, shooting a young boy with an RPG. The dude that I had taken had done that, and that was his thing, and it just, like, it broke him. And so it's like, and I was just talking, we were having a dinner conversation about, like, stuff that you see, like that the enemy's going to try to take advantage of that, of any weakness they can. So using young boys and girls as as cannon fodder, if you will, or as enemy combatants. But there's no simple solution to this. No. There's no blue pill or red pill that you can take or green pill, and we try to work in conjunction with the VA, but I also I spend as much of my time reaching out to people who never served and try to have those conversations with them of saying, like, don't ask this, because, for the reason that I just mentioned, they could cause a person to do that. And you know what? If you talk to them, like, what's it like? What's it really like in combat? Like, how was it being away for Christmas? How was it being away? Like, you'll build rapport with people. And then eventually somebody might say, yeah, like, so there we were. Just listen. Don't ask questions. Just listen, because that person can have as much of an impact on that person's life as, somebody like me or you, a fellow warrior. But you just have to have patience and know, like, if you never have that conversation, you never have a conversation. But learn all you can about the person, learn about their deployment, and if they ever feel comfortable and trust you, they'll open up and talk to you. Or what I tell a lot of wives, and I'm guilty of this, I don't tell my wife as much stuff. I mean, I think she's probably heard all of my stories through me talking with other, like, people that I served with. But it's just like, be okay not ever hearing all the stories. Be okay. It's not that they're hiding stuff, right? It's especially men as, like the protectors and, the warriors. We're supposed to be the leaders of the family and set those examples. It's hard for us to, like, take our armor off and show our flaws and show our weaknesses.
And not only that, I mean, heck, there was stuff I didn't even remember until I actually sat down with a VA psychologist. Like, it's sort of pouring out, and stuff that I hadn't even thought about in years happened. But I was more that when I got back from my first deployment, my cousin, who's a teacher, asked me to meet with her school. This is, 06, so it's an early part of the, and I think it was 5 or 6 years old, and watch a 5-year-old raise their hand and stand up and ask you in front of a room of people, have you ever shot anybody? And how you're supposed to wiggle your way out of that one. You're not prepared to answer that question, especially not from somebody so young. When your buddies answer it, you shut up. You can't tell a 5-year-old a room full of people without coming off like a jerk. So I could certainly sympathize and empathize with the difficulty of that question and what it can do to you. But again, the website for everybody out there, sportsmenforwarriors.org, and it's MEN, not MAN. Sportsmenforwarriors.org is where you guys can go. You can support, you can donate, offer to be a volunteer, and obviously, if you know anybody who needs the help, make sure you guys have them reach out there and nominate somebody for assistance. So, I mean, look, man, we've almost gone 2 hours and it's flown by, and it's always a good sign, because there was a lot of good things said and a lot of topics touched that a lot of people need to hear. I'm glad that you are in a better place mentally for your own self. I'm glad that Sportsmen for Warriors is making the impact that it is, and it's a way that to give back to veterans. And I volunteer and work with veterans once a week. I work with a nonprofit as well, and I only do it just to keep close to other veterans, right? It's just to be in a group of like-minded people and people who understand you, where you don't have to say much, they just get it, and there's a certain comfort in that. And so I'm glad you're bringing that level of comfort out to the forefront for a lot of us. Yeah, no,
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about me, more so about the organizations that I've worked with and continue to support. And again, like, it's time, talent, and money. So whether it's hunting or fishing or whatever, we'll not say no, because there's always warriors in need. And again, I'm truly grateful to be on this. And yeah, you're right. Like, everybody needs something different, and we take each warrior, each nomination we get on a case by case, and we kind of adapt and come up with a plan for that individual warrior. And then we adjust, and we've had hard conversations where, like, hey, you should go to the VA, and maybe you need some medicine just to get through this stuff. But we've also had the same hard conversation, the flip side of that, of like, hey, maybe you need to go to the VA and say, this stuff's not working. I'm just drooling, and I'm never going to overcome this in this state. So,
well, again, continued success.
Yeah.
And if you're ever coming through the Atlanta area, make sure you look me up. And
yeah, we'll do, definitely.
And you can take me hunting or fishing, two things that guy, so I'm from New York. So thinking fishing is, if I need fish, I go to the supermarket. If I want meat, I'll go to.
But we're teaching them, right? Like you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
Keep telling people though, if I go hunting, I want to find something, pursue it, and kill it. I don't want to sit and wait. That's called waiting. I want to sit. Called waiting. It's not called hunting.
I always teach the kids that, like, that's why it's called fishing, not catching, because you don't always. So there's life lessons to be taught in everything we do.
Oh, brother. Excellent stuff. Well, again, thank you for your time, candor, and honesty.
Thank you.
Continued success going forward. And Ben Bateman, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zinno. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at producer@hazardground.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.